Hello everyone, this is Vivek Singh. I am working as a senior solution specialist with Informatica. In this session, we'll be talking about how to enable SSL for Informatica Cluster Service in Informatica EDC 10.5.0 or higher versions. In Informatica 10.5.0 or higher versions, Informatica Cluster Service, ICS, components like Nomad, Solar, PostgreSQL, Zookeeper, MongoDB, these will be used in mutual TLS authentication to interact with the cluster service. So basically on Informatica domain server, we'll be having catalog service, Informatica cluster service running, and the cluster service will be interacting with the Mongo, Solar, Postgres, which will be running on the Informatica cluster servers using mutual TLS authentication. And since it is a mutual TLS authentication, the existing CA sign or self-signed certificate which were used for the Informatica domain or node or the admin console, those will not be useful for ICS components which are listed here. Because of that, we need to generate a separate set of certificate which will be specifically used by the Mongo, Solar, Postgres, Nomad to interact with the domain. The existing CSN or self-signed certificate will still work for the Informatica domain service like EDC, DPM, EDP, Analyst Tool, DIS. For all those Informatica domain services, your existing CA sign or self-signed certificate will work. Only for the services which are running on Informatica cluster machine like Mongo, Solar, Postgres, Nomad, for these, the existing certificates will not be working. And so we need to generate separate set of certificate for these. Before we proceed further to discuss in detail about how to generate those certificates or what are all the options, there are few prerequisites. The very first prerequisite is if your domain is SSL enabled, then your ICS would be SSL enabled as well. We cannot have domain as a non-SSL and ICS as SSL. No, that is not possible. Both has to be SSL only, or both has to be non-SSL only. The other requirement is the Informatica EDC version. You should use the latest version of the Informatica. So, or the minimum version required is the 10.5.0.0.2. Next thing is if you are using any custom certificate, whether it's a self-sign or it's a CA sign. If it's a custom certificate for the TLS authentication, then we need to place the corresponding Keystore and Truststore file in any location other than the default location. And the default location is Infa Home Services Shared Security. So apart from this location, you have to place your custom certificate in any other location. Now to enable SSL for ICS, there are three options, and these options depends on customer what they are going to choose. So the very first option is in case at domain level, you have decided to use default self-signed certificate, which are shipped along with Informatica. And if you want to use same default self-signed certificate for ICS also, then you do not need to do anything. You just need to point the Keystore and Truststore file location in Informatica admin console to the default location, which is Infa Home Services Shared Security. And once you have done it, and as soon as you start your ICS service, the required certificate for ICS will be automatically generated using the default self-signed certificate. So on your screen, you can see where exactly we need to make sure that our certificate location should be the default location in case if you're going with the option 1. So in Informatica Administrator console, if you log in and if you navigate to your node, here you can see the Keystore and Truststore directory. And here if you notice, here we need to point it to the default directory. And these Keystore and Truststore which are present in this default directory, that will be used to generate ICS certificate automatically on ICS startup. And this will happen only if you are using the default self-signed certificate which are present in this location. I have logged into my Informatica domain server, and here if you see in the default location, which is in Informatica Home and then Services Shared Security, I'm having the default certificate which I shipped with the Informatica. So I'm having a default Keystore and Truststore. So I'm having both JKS and PEM versions of the certificate here. And if I log into my cluster machine and go to the location where the cluster services are installed, the Mongo, Nomad, all the services are installed in this directory. If I see, currently there is no cert directory here. In case you are not aware about how to set the location for Keystore and Truststore, in the reference section of this slide, I have provided the command. So you need to use these commands basically. So if you are having to update the gateway node, you need to use this particular command. And if you are having worker nodes, then along with the gateway node command, you need to use this command to update the location for the worker nodes. So once you have set this location, then we can go ahead and start our ICS service. So let me go to the ICS service here, and here I'll go to the action and enable this service. Once this ICS service is up and successfully running, you will be able to see the certificates, a folder with the same name as the ICS name, which will be created in the default location. So let the ICS service execute here. Now the ICS service is successfully started. We can go to the server and we can check if it has generated the certificate. So here we can see it has created a folder with the same name as ICS service name. And inside this folder, we can see the client and cluster certificates are generated here. So it has generated 3 folders, and inside these 3 folders, there will be few certificates. Now, if I go to the cluster machine, and here if I check, here also I can see a folder with the name cert has been created, and inside this folder I will be able to see client and CA certificate. And now we can go ahead and we can start the catalog service from here. Now, one thing I would like to highlight here is the Keystore files or Truststore files which you see in the process tab of ICS. This is not the Keystore used by the Nomad, Solar, or PostgreSQL, because those services are running on a separate machine, separate server, which we call it as a cluster server. So these Keystore files which you see here, these are basically related. These are related only to the ICS service process which is running on the Informatica node. So basically this Keystore file is used for the communication between the domain and this particular service. So how this service is interacting with the domain or the administrator console, for that purpose this Keystore file is used. Now the actual Keystore file or Truststore file which will be used for the Nomad, Solar, Postgres, Zookeeper, MongoDB, which will be running on the cluster service, that will be pulled from this Keystore and Truststore location. Second option is if you want to use any custom certificate. So let's say you are using any custom CA sign certificate at the domain level, and even for the ICS you want to use any external CA sign certificate. So external CA sign certificate means a certificate which you are getting it signed from any external certificate authority like GoDaddy or DigiCert. So in those cases, you need to generate certificate for your ICS service using a utility which we call it as a script utility. So this is the name of the utility. Either you can get it from the shipping team or you can get it from the Informatica network portal from where you download the hotfixes. So from any of the places you can download this utility and then you can configure it to generate the certificate for ICS. So I'll not go much detail for this option because on this particular option, there is already a video KB available on Informatica support channel. You can simply search with this particular title and you will find a detailed video on this particular option. But just to give you a high level overview, right? Using this utility, what we will be doing basically, we will be generating a certificate sign request for the ICS using this particular utility, and then we'll be sending this all these CSR files to the certificate authority. Maybe let's say you are having GoDaddy or DigiCert. So to those certificate authority, we will be sending the CSRs which we generated in the first step using the utility, and then certificate authority will be signing the CSRs and they will be sending you the signed certificate. So just make sure that you get the signed certificate in PEM format, PEM format. And once you get the PEM signed certificate in PEM format, then again we need to use this utility to generate the required certificate for ICS. And once we generate this certificate, we need to place this certificate in the custom location where your domain certificates are present. So once you place there and once you restart your ICS service, then it will be pulling the certificate from there and ICS service will start. Now the third option is if for a domain you are using a custom sign certificate, whether it's a custom CA sign certificate or if it's a custom self sign certificate. When I say custom certificate, that means a certificate which is present in any location other than the default location, and the default location is this one. So if you are using a custom certificate at the domain level and at ICS level, either you want to use the default self-signed certificate which are shipped with Informatica, or you want to use a custom certificate which will be having a signing capability. So the difference between option 2 and option 3 is, like, at domain level you are using the CA signed certificate or self-signed certificate, but at ICS level in option 2 you are using the external CA signed certificate. But in option 3 we are going to use either default self-signed certificate, or we are going to use a custom certificate which will be having the signing capability. Because in most of the cases, when you get external CA signed certificate, those will not be having the signing capability. So in case if you are having a custom SL certificate which is having the signing capability, then we can go with the option number 3. And if you want to go with the option number 3, in that case we need to use a utility called GenerateCustomSSLUtility. So this utility, again, you can download it from the Informatica network portal, or you can get it from the shipping team. When using option 3, we have two options. Either we can use the default self-signed certificate. So if you are using the default self-signed certificate, they will be the version 1 certificate, and there you do not need to have any prerequisites. You can simply use it as it is. But in case if you want to use a custom SSL certificate, then custom SSL certificate, whether it's a self-sign or it's a internal sign, that should be having the signing capability. And how to verify whether that is having signing capability or not? So to do that, you need to run this particular command. So keytool-list command you need to run. And once you run this command, you should be able to see basic constraint detail in the certificate. So let's say if you are having any custom SSL certificate which is having a hierarchy, like it's having root and then intermediate and then site or server level certificate. So for all the 3 hierarchies, these 2 parameters should be there. So under the basic constraint section, your CA should be true and your path length should be greater than 0. If these 2 parameters are not present in any of the hierarchy in the custom SSL certificate, or if these parameters are present but the values are anything other than these 2 values, that means that certificate is not having signing capability, and we cannot use that certificate with the utility to generate certificate for ICS. Once you have verified, then we can use this utility to generate certificate for ICS. For this session, I'm using internal CA signed certificate for domain, and for ICS I have created one custom self-signed certificate which is having signing capability. So let me show you what changes I have made in the administrator console and how this certificate will look like. So as the first requirement was that the Keystore and Truststore directory in the admin console should be pointing to a custom location, because we are going to use a custom certificate. So here, if you notice, both Keystore and Truststore directories are pointing to a custom location. Remember to keep Keystore and Truststore both at the same location. If you keep it as a different location, it will create problem in future. So as we were discussing previously, that if we are using custom SSL certificate for ICS, that should be having signing capability. And how we can verify that? By using this particular command. So let me jump into the Unix box and I will run this command to verify if my custom certificate which I'm going to use for ICS, if it's having signing capability or not. So this is my domain machine, and these are the certificate which I'm going to use for my ICS certificate generation using the utility. So I will verify this Keystore file. Now, if you see the content of this Keystore file, which I'm going to use for the ICS service, here you can see under the base, I can see it is having basic constraint here. And in the basic constraint, CA is true and path length is greater than 0. So if these 2 parameters are there, that means we can utilize this certificate for ICS certificate generation using the utility. So once we have verified signing capability of custom SSL certificate for ICS, we can start with the generate custom utility, and we can use this utility to generate the ICS certificate. Now, the very first step you can see on the screen is that we need to import Truststore of the ICS into Truststore of the domain. Now, what does it mean is basically the Keystore file which I showed you just before this. Truststore of that particular Keystore file, we need to import that Truststore into the Truststore of the domain. And once we have imported the Truststore, then we can provide that detail into the input.properties file, which we'll be getting after extracting the GenerateCustomSSL utility. And after filling this input.property file, we can run this command to generate the required certificates. So this was the Keystore file which we just checked, which we are going to use for the ICS. Now, for this Keystore file, I have created one Truststore. So with this Truststore will contain the public keys for the public private key pair which is present in the Keystore. So what we need to do is, the very first step is we need to import this ICS Truststore into the Truststore of the domain. This particular location, my domain Truststore is present, and in this Truststore we need to import the Truststore of ICS. So let me clear this screen. Switch to the directory where Informatica domain, Keystore and Truststore files are present. So here are my Informatica domain, Keystore and Truststore files, and in this Truststore I will be importing the ICS Truststore. So for that I can use keytool import keystore command, and here I have given source keystore location as the ICS Truststore, and it will be imported into infa Truststore. Okay, so here I can see one entry is successfully imported. I can validate it by running keytool command here. So let me run keytool -list keystore, and here I can see, here I can see the infa ICS alias is imported here, right? So here I can see this is pointing to my cluster machine. So this is the certificate. Now what I'll do is I'll create a new PEM version of this Truststore, because I have added an ICS entry in this Truststore. So what I'll do is I'll remove the old truststore.pem file and I'll create a new one using this particular jks file. So for that we can use these two commands. This will generate a certificate in PKCS12 format, and using OpenSSL we can convert it into PEM version. Let me see if I'm having the PEM version now. Yeah, so I am having the PEM version now here. Let me change the permission of this to. Okay, so now we have the updated infatruststore.pem also. These PEM files are used by catalog service during the startup. So we need to have the JKS version also of both Keystore and Truststore, and PEM version also. Now after this, the next step is to fill the input.property file which we will be getting as part of the utility. So I have downloaded the utility GenerateCustomSSLUtility.zip file. This I have downloaded, and then I unzipped it. After unzipping, we can see three things: one jar file, one script folder, and one input.property file. So I have already filled this input.property file, but I'll just quickly open it and show you what information we need to fill it in this file. So the very first parameter which we need to give it here is Keystore file location. Now this will be the Keystore of ICS, which we checked in the previous step, and the password of this Keystore which we need to give in the next parameter. Now this will be the Truststore file location of the ICS. Now if you remember in the previous step, what we did is we imported Truststore of ICS into domain Truststore, and that's where instead of giving location of ICS Truststore, we are directly given Truststore location of the domain Truststore, because this domain Truststore will be containing the information of ICS Truststore also. So because anyway we need to perform the step of importing ICS Truststore into the domain Truststore. So instead of doing it later, we perform that step first, and then we are giving the domain Truststore file location, and then the password of the same Truststore file which we are giving it here, that will be coming here, and then we need to give domain Keystore and domain Truststore file password here. So this will be the password of the Keystore and Truststore which are present in this particular location. After that, where we want to generate these output files for ICS, right? So because the directory which we are going to give here, it is going to generate the required certificates for ICS. So this location we will be giving, so this Keystore and this Truststore output directory, this location should be same, otherwise you will face issue later. So we will be giving same location. So what we generally do is we give the same location as where our Informatica domain Truststore or Keystore files are present. So same location I have given it here, and then The next parameter is server nodes. We need to pass it here. So this server node is nothing but the fully qualified domain name of all the cluster node. Here you can see the instruction also. This will be containing your data node, processing node, along with the gateway node. So if you have multiple nodes in your cluster, that you need to give it here. In my case, I'm only having one node, which is acting as gateway node, processing node, and data node all. So I have given that here. If you have multiple nodes in the cluster, then you can pass everything separated by comma. And then here we need to give the name of the ICS service, so which you have created in the admin console. So in the admin console, this is my ICS service, and that name, this name I will be giving here. So what it will do is it will create a folder in the location which we have specified here. So under this location, we will see GCS_HC_ICS1 folder, and inside that folder, all the ICS related certificates will be created. And then the next parameter is client node. So client node is basically, it's a combination of domain node and all the cluster node, which includes data node, processing nodes, and gateway node. So here, this is my domain node and this is my cluster node. And then we need to give the name of the Informatica domain here. And the last parameter is basically we need to give the cluster node DNS name. So this is my cluster node. So the DNS name for this cluster node is informatica.com. Similarly, let's say if you are using an AWS machine and it's having abc.something.aws.com, then your DNS name will be aws.com. So after giving this detail, we can save this file. After saving this file, we need to execute java-jar and then give the file, this jar file, and then we need to pass this input.property file here, and then we can execute it. After executing this utility, one log file will be generated, and in this log file, we can check the status of the job. So here we can see generating ICS cluster certs ran successfully. Now we can go to the location and we can see if the certs are generated there. So this is the location basically which we give where the certs will be generated. So I'll go here, and then now if you see here, one folder is created, GCS ICS cluster service name, and in this folder all the certs will be generated. So here, client and cluster, both certs are generated here. In these two folders, the bunch of certificate will be generated, which will be used by the ICS. So when ICS service will start, it will pick the certificate from these two folders, right? And then it will start the services. So after performing these steps, we can go to the Informatica Administrator console and we can restart the ICS here. So I'll enable this ICS service from here. So now the ICS service is up here, and we can go ahead and we can start the catalog service as well. While the catalog service is started, if I log into the Unix box and if I go to the cluster machine, right? So in the cluster machine, if we do ls-ltr, we can see a folder called cert is created. So basically what happened in the background is we generated ICS related certificate using the utility in the same location where node, keystore, and truststore files are present. And as soon as we started ICS service from the administrator console, the ICS service pulled this certificate from here and it generated the required certificate to start the Nomad, Zookeeper, MongoDB, all those services on the cluster node. And that's where you can see the certs here, cert folder here, where all the certificate will be present. So now the catalog service is also up and running. We can open the URL and we can cross-check it once. So the UI is accessible now. I have listed the KB articles related to this session and all the commands which I have used in this session in the reference section. You can always refer that. We would love to hear from you on any of the Informatica channels. Thank you.